This is Innovledia.
Hello and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to unwrap your models and assign textures to their surfaces in Maya. Alright? So, what exactly is unwrapping? It is a process in which we unfold and map the surface of a 3D object on a two-dimensional plane. Mapping a surface means we place the unfolded surface in a specific order or arrangement as required. For example, this is an unwrapped cover of a box. A box is cubical in shape, so we cannot just put a box inside a printer to print all the details on its surface. The labels are generally printed on a straight sheet of paper or cardboard, and then they are cut and folded in the shape of a box. In 3D, we follow a similar process, but in a little different way. What we do is, we unfold the surface of an object on a two-dimensional plane, and then we map the images or textures on its surface. And then, that surface is folded back to its original form automatically. Alright? While texturing is a process of mapping images or textures on an unwrapped or unfolded surface of an object, so as to render the surface with all the details as found on real-life surfaces. So, let us take a look at a simple demonstration to help you practically understand these concepts in a better way. Okay? Here is a simple cube representing a box. I'm going to unwrap this cube and place all the textures on its surface to make it look like this object right next to it. Now, if I go to the UV menu, we are going to find here many methods in which we can unwrap the surface of an object. The one that we'll choose depends on the shape of the surface that we are trying to unfold, that whether it is cylindrical in shape or cubical or spherical or a combination of more than one shape. Alright? Let me first isolate the cube by selecting it and pressing Ctrl+1 on the keyboard. This will isolate it from rest of the scene. And also press F to focus on the object. Now, as our object is cubical in shape, so we can select it and go to UV menu and select this automatic projection method. What this will do is, it will unfold the cube from all the sides. So, if we open the UV editor by going back to UV menu and clicking on it, what we are going to see is 6 separate sides of a cube placed here on a 2D plane, which has U and V axes just like X and Y. I can select all these sides and move them using the Move tool. You can use the shortcuts W for Move tool, E for Rotate tool, and R for Scale tool. Alright? So, there is something that you have to understand about these projection techniques and some associated terms, like what are UVs and what is an UV shell. First of all, this 2D plane has U and V axis, which you can take it like X and Y axis, like we normally have on a graph paper, and hence these points are called UV coordinates, the very same points that we call as vertices in a 3D space, having XYZ coordinates. And this separated chunk of face is called an UV shell. An UV shell can consist of a single face like we have here, or it can have a group of faces as long as they are connected to each other and not separated like this. Alright? Now, as I unwrapped the cube, you might have noticed one thing here, that we have definitely unwrapped its surface into 6 different sides separated from each other. But that is only applicable here within the UV editor, and nothing has exactly happened in the 3D space. It is still just a cube. So, how does it work? Have you heard of a projector that we use to watch movies and presentations? What the projector does is, It projects the photo or video on any screen, which can be anything, like a wall, a whiteboard, or even a piece of cloth. The same technique is used in Maya, and that is the reason why these are called projection methods. Because what happens here is this: as we use one of these projection methods, it projects the surfaces of a 3D object on a two-dimensional plane that we have here within the UV editor. Then what we do is we manipulate these projected surfaces to map them on a texture file. And then what Maya does is it uses the same projection to map the texture on the surface of this 3D object. So the projection works in both the direction. First, we project the surfaces from a 3D object on a 2D plane, and then we adjust the projection on the texture file as required. And then finally, this same projection is used to wrap this texture around the 3D object. Alright? So, this is how it works. And hence, what we manipulate here within the UV editor is the projection of the surface and not the actual surface. So basically, when you are selecting anything within the UV editor, you are actually selecting the projection. And when you are selecting anything within the viewport, then you are selecting the actual surface of the object. Just keep this in mind, alright? Now, in order to assign a texture to the surface of this cube, we have to first create a standard shader by going to Hypershade, clicking on the shader option and selecting this standard surface option. This will create a new shader which you can rename it to anything you wish. Then go to this color attribute for the base and click on this checkered box here. This will bring up this dialog box where we can select the file node and then rename it as well. You can rename its placeholder too. Then select the file node from here and click on this folder icon to locate the texture file. All the textures are located in the source images folder of our project. I'm going to select this aloe vera cream.png. Here is the preview. And click on open to load the file. What happens here is this: the shader, instead of using a single color for the surface, it is now going to use this image to add all these details to the surface of the object. Without a shader, textures cannot be displayed on the surface of an object. So, you have to go through this process whenever you want to add a texture to the surface of an object. Alright? Now, I'm going to select the cube, go to Hypershade and right click on this shader and select Assign Material to Selection. Once done, I can close the Hypershade window. Now, all I'm going to do is select all of these UV shells and scale them down together to bring closer to the dimension of this part of the texture. Once done, I can go to the viewport and right click on the cube, go to UV and select UV shell. This will let me select the UV shells directly from here, okay? So, I'm going to select the top shell, go to the UV editor and move it to the top section of the texture. You have to adjust it properly so that it doesn't overlap with some other parts of the texture or UV shells. Once done, then select the front shell and move it to this part. Alright? Then I'm going to select the right UV shell and move it to this part of the texture. Then select the left UV shell and move it to this part. Select the back one and move it here. Then I have to make some proper adjustments so that nothing looks inappropriate. everything should appear correctly. As you can see that this back UV shell is projecting the texture upside down. We can fix this by rotating the UV shell. We just have to select it, then go to UV Editor's Modify menu and click on Rotate. We just have to do it again. And look, now it is appearing in a proper way. Finally, I can move this bottom shell right here. Alright? Now, I can minimize the editor, go to Object Mode, and deselect it. I am going to do a quick render to see a preview of the final output, how it is going to look. And here it is. Everything appears to be good and working. Now, I am going to unwrap this cylindrical object the same way but using a different projection method. First, let me assign the shaders to the top and bottom parts of the container. Let me open the Hypershade, select the top cap, and assign this material to the cap. Then select the bottom part and assign this material to that object. Once done, I am going to create a new shader for the middle part of the container, where we want to put the label like the one on this container. Alright? So, let me create a new shader and rename it to something more appropriate. And change this roughness attribute for the specular to 0.35 to reduce the reflections on the surface. Then click here on this checkered box. Select a file node and then rename all the nodes just like we did previously. Okay. Select the file node, then click on this folder icon and select the texture file. This is how it looks, and click on Open to load the file. Now we can minimize this and select the cylinder and isolate it by pressing Ctrl+1 on the keyboard, and also press F to focus. Then go to Face Mode and select this entire loop of faces by holding down the Shift key and double-clicking on the adjacent face. As it is cylindrical in shape, so I am going to use this cylindrical projection method to unwrap the surface. Now, this is only covering half the surface. So we have to select and drag these handles unless it covers the entire surface. You can also use this slider to do that. Alright? Now deselect everything and select the loop of faces again. Go to Hypershade and assign the shader that we have created. Now go to Object Mode and press Ctrl+1 to exit from the isolation mode. I can rotate the cylinder to make it face towards the front side. Then go to UV Editor, go to UV Shell mode and select the shell. Activate the Scale tool by pressing R. To match this line on the texture, you have to carefully adjust it to make it appear correctly. Once done, we can go to Object Mode and take a look whether or not the texture has been wrapped properly on the surface. For me, it appears to be correct. So, I can do a quick render of the scene again to see a preview of how it is going to appear in the final output. Alright? Now, if you are comfortable working in Photoshop, what you can do is arrange all the UV shells of an object within this section, ranging from 0 to 1 both in U and V axis. Select all of them, then go to Image menu and click on UV Snapshot. This will let you save this UV layout as an image. You can enter the size of the image in pixels, how bigger you want the image to be, and it will be saved in the images directory of your project folder. You can also choose the color of the edges for the UV shells. Then click on Apply and Close to export the image. And here it is. You can use this image as a reference to manually create the texture exactly where it has to be on the UV shells. This technique is mostly used for complex models made of a variety of shapes and forms. Alright? So, this is how we can unwrap our models and assign textures to their surfaces in Maya. See you in the next video.